Good evening and welcome to the Monday, May 15th meeting of the Akron Public School Board's Legal Contracts and Policy Committee. Thank you to all who are in attendance here today and for those who are listening as well. So we will go ahead and we will get started with item 1.01, our previous meeting summary from January 30th of 2023, and attached is that summary. Are there any questions, comments, corrections to that summary? And I was not in attendance, so I will reserve my comments. And if there are none, we will accept this as presented to us. And we will move on to item 2.01, Neola's January 2023 update and overview. And so I'm assuming that's for me to read. And so there's an overview here on these items. And I apologize. I thought I was coming as a spectator to this meeting and not sharing the meeting, so I've actually not reviewed.
I can provide a brief overview.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And please introduce yourself.
Hi. Am I doing this right? Maybe mine doesn't.
There you go.
Hi, my name is Haley Kepchar. I work with Retzel and Andrus, and I'm legal counsel with Diana Feidel for Akron Public Schools. There were a number of policy updates for Ohio, specifically through Neola. They included meeting updates as to meeting state performance indicators, the College Credit Plus program, homebound instruction programs, volunteers, health services, graduation requirements, removals and suspensions and exclusion, procurement with federal funds, animals on district property policies, school safety, emergency situations at school, and student abuse and neglect. Also included was a special update with respect to technology, which provides updated terminology, references to multi-factor authentication, added cybersecurity, and information related to the content and functionality specifications as prescribed by the Office of Civil Rights for accessibility purposes. And the last update was in reference to policy language requested by a number of districts, which is compatible with the Ohio Department of Health's tobacco use and cessation program. So does anyone want to discuss any of those policies further at this time? Okay, and then I don't know how you'd like to run this. Do you want me to just continue until I'm?
Sure.
Okay. So with regard to the student handbooks, there wasn't really much update. The update consisted of edited and clean documents, basically templates for the 2023-2024 student handbooks. The most notable changes were to the requirements for honors diploma and student discipline as to possession of use of tobacco and use or possession of a weapon. Does anyone have any questions or comments about any of those policies? Okay, then we can move to, what number is this? 2.03, special update as to pregnant and nursing women. So Neola issued a special release in response to the enactment of 2 acts by Congress in an attempt to create new legal protections and remedies for individuals who are pregnant or nursing. The 2 of these are the Providing Urgent Maternal Protection for Nursing Mothers Act, or the PUMP Act, and the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. And those both take an effect in the next few months and will likely cover all public school employers and most school employees. If anyone would like to discuss that further, I have that with me as well. If there are any questions or comments. And next we are at the discussion of policies by Kathy.
All right, I have a few policies just for review. First one, really for discussion, if you like. This is a draft of a remote work policy that we drafted a few months back. With the with the onset of COVID and everyone being remote during that time, we've since have had a number of occasions where employees have requested to be able to continue to work from home. So we created this policy based on a lot of research that we've done with other districts and with other companies as well on how that would work. So it would be for basically people that work in the offices that might be in a situation where they could possibly do that. It would be a hybrid type of program where you would potentially work 3 days remotely and then 2 days on site. And so this policy contains some of the provisions for that and how that would work. There would be an application process completed by the employee to be able to do that. It would be reviewed if every 6 months with an employee once someone was permitted to do that. Sets out what the work schedule should be and availability and things like that. Provides for a provision that if you are requested to come here to a meeting, that you have to be available to come in within 2 hours so that people are nearby so that they can get here if need be. And it talks about equipment, the equipment that we would provide versus equipment the employee would be expected to provide, and then the security with our data and the VPN access and how that would work. So I'll open that up for any kind of questions or comments.
And so these positions that are eligible, are there just certain positions that are eligible, or does an individual employee fill out an application to request that their position become eligible? Does that make sense?
Well, this would be primarily for administrators and non-bargaining employees. With any of our bargaining unit employees, of course, we would have to specifically negotiate that with those bargaining groups. So this would be the non-bargaining and administrative employees.
Do you know potentially how many folks would be eligible?
I don't know. I know that there are, we've been asked specifically by Technology Services for their employees to be able to work remotely. That seems to be one department where that is pretty competitive. In a pretty competitive industry, tend to be where we lose employees. A couple that have left us for remote positions. And so we do feel a need to address it in particular with that department. Our finance department as well has had some situations where employees have asked to work remotely in a few of the other departments.
Thank you.
So, Ms. McVeigh, just for clarification, in the absence of a policy, no one is currently working from home?
We've had situations where employees have worked from home, and that's really happened for quite a while, where maybe someone is home ill, maternity leave, or some other situation like that that presents itself for them to be able to work from home to keep up with the work. Okay. I know there's been a couple circumstances within the payroll department in order to keep that functioning and going. When someone's been home for whatever reason, they've been allowed to work
so
from home.
Currently, you've been overseeing it in the absence of a policy, just on a case-by-case basis?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah, it has happened just temporarily here and there, off and on, and not under any specific policy, because we haven't had one. All right, moving on then, assuming there's no other questions on that. The other policies that were presented here were policies that were received from Neola with recommendations for updates. At this point, they're being provided for information purposes. It's the evaluation of principals and other administrators, a non-renewal of a teacher contract, standards-based teacher evaluation, standards-based school counselor evaluation, and the evaluation of classified staff.
So under the retirement policy, what would you say are the major changes or recommendations that are being suggested?
Under the retirement policy, for example, if you look at, get back to, I'm looking at, they're all basically worded the same right now. Under 3145, I just opened up that one. The very last sentence there says a retirement once accepted by the board may not then be rescinded. And we've had a few situations where an employee requests that we rescind the retirement date or that we revise it, whether it be a retirement or a resignation. And so there was a desire on the part of the board the last time that this happened that maybe we should revisit the wording in the policy to see whether it should be changed to accommodate those situations. And maybe it says, unless in extreme circumstances or something like that, we'd want to put in there if the board wishes to do that. With the retirements, it's just for informational purposes. It's usually been in this case where someone puts in a retirement notice and then they talk to STRS or SERS and find out that if they wait a few months, then their monthly benefit would maybe go up. So that's usually why they request that.
Any other questions on that? Any questions on the personnel or student records?
Sorry. We mentioned like 3 things in a row. Are we on the teacher evaluation one, or are we still before that?
I think we went from the discussion of retirement policies, if there's nothing further there. Our team did some research with regard to that just to confirm that the board is able to make those changes to provide some more flexibility with that plan. I wasn't sure if that's something that Diana was already had already communicated to the committee, but just so that everyone is aware that research is complete. The personnel files and the student records portions of this were added by mistake. Is what Attorney Feidel informed me. So we are going to touch upon those in August at the next meeting. So now we are at transportation.
I did that review for 8600, and I can update everybody on that one. This is mostly related to House Bill 110, which was the last biennium bill, in which they made a number of changes to transportation to school districts, and especially in areas where routes and non-public charter, parochial, private school transportation is involved that the public school district is required to provide. So some of the updates, as I read it as an example, they had changed in the first page. They talk about the student is eligible in their home area. I revised it to say address of residence, and that is the reason. That's exactly how a student becomes eligible, is by their residence. So as an example, in many urban areas, I could have a student eligible on one side of the street and not on the other side. So home area is too general, which is why Mr. Andexler and I wanted to change it to address of residence. We wanted also to, we accepted the change in House Bill 110, which is located in the 4th paragraph. Transportation students who are not entitled to transportation under state law will not be reduced to the start of the school year. It used to be, and you have been around a long time, that if one of the things that districts would discuss as they went out for levies is how they would have to adjust if the levy did not pass. And one of the things that would happen is, as an example, districts would say we would go to state minimums. So as an example, they might have been providing high school yellow bus transport. That is not what the requirement is. The requirement is K-8 2 miles or more. Or maybe they had K-8, but it was, say, at a mile. And they would change it in January. So now what this change says, once we start a route in the school year, we can adjust the route, but we cannot eliminate the route. So we want to make sure that that was, reviewed, et cetera. Again, as you go down through this policy, it's always been very specific for non-public charter community schools that the student that is requesting to be transported by the family, and please understand, it is by the family, it is not by the school. They can become ineligible if the travel of the bus from the home school on which the residence would be their home school. So I'll use Buchtel as an example. Say that the resident would be at Buchtel, but they want to go to Lake Center Christian in Hartville. If that, from that side of the school where the bus drops off to the exact part on Lake Center Christian's property drops off is more than 30 minutes, the student is not eligible for transport. And we wanted to make sure that that was reflective. It's in the policy. We just added the other sentence, that was there before because it makes it more detailed. It's very difficult when people understand what 30 minutes is. And the 30 minutes, when somebody says, but I think I'm eligible, we are required to do that drive during a regular school day, only in the morning when we are actually on the road. So therefore, as an example, if we were going from Buchtel to Lake Center Christian, we must be on the road between 7 to 8. And therefore, it is with normal traffic under normal circumstances. And we have done a number of these over the years, and you sit and you actually clock it and record it. And then you put it in the file, and we will then send it on to the person and advise them that they are or are not eligible. So those are very important rules that we wanted to make sure. We accepted everything else regarding House Bill 110, which included the July 1st date, which is the new requirement at the end of the page, and that the board would provide the transportation within the 30 minutes. Again, it was address of residence, and that it would be provided to community non-public schools pursuant to this policy and state law is tentative and subject to change. And I will advise in raising House Bill 33, which is the new biennium, we're waiting for the next set that may affect this. They have a new part that they're considering, which is called comparable, and we're all trying to figure out what the word comparable means. There is, in Akron Public Schools, currently 11 types of transport that we do. If you break it down to the different types that we provide, and as an example, all students K-8, 2 miles or more, are considered eligible. We also have orthopedic students because of their IEP. That is on an orthopedic bus, so that's our second. We have IEPs that require not a community cluster stop, which is on our yellow buses for regular students, but it may be a home stop. So now you're getting into van transportation. We must meet the McKinney-Vento Homeless Act. We must meet the Foster Student Act. We must meet the other actual transports mandated by federal and state requirements. And then on top of that, on our own schedule within Akron, we have morning and afternoon, but we also have midday trips because some of our students in our ELPs are only here in the morning, and they go home in the morning, and then we pick them up and we go home in the afternoon. Then there are our field trips. There are our athletic trips. We're transporting every day, and actually we currently have the buses running almost 7 days a week. So this policy hadn't been updated, but it truly was a change out of House Bill 110. The one that is very restrictive in this is the one that says we must now provide dropping off the student at the school of enrollment not prior to 30 minutes in which this day begins of school. So think of an Akron elementary school student. Classes begin at 8:30. We shouldn't have them on site before 8 o'clock. Now, we can probably do that fairly well, but in the afternoon, we have to have them off-site within 30 minutes of dismissal. There is, unfortunately, no wiggle room in the way they wrote this particular policy. There's no requirement to adjust for road closures, floods, weather, any type of this. So as an example, when they wrote this, it became so restrictive that some school districts, fortunately not Akron, we've only had one, has had what are called filed noncompliance. And if anyone, it doesn't even say it has to be a parent or of a student currently enrolled at a school, files a complaint with ODE that comes to the superintendent and it is investigated, one of the issues under the old statute is if they are found non-compliant, and I'll use Booktel as an example, if we're non-compliant last year as this was going forward for providing this service correctly, then they have a right to claw back the funding that they give us from the state. Now, as an example, for what we obtained from the state in the year, and currently our budget for transportation is about $12 to $13 million a year. This is 1/3 or more of our funding. So therefore, you don't want that to happen, and we have been very fortunate in Akron. We worked this out well and have not found to be non-compliant. That is not the case currently with Grove City, Madison, Columbus, Toledo, Cincinnati. So they currently had taken this to court and are currently dealing in the court case regarding this. We're now waiting to see if the adjustments from 33, the new House bill, will make some more wiggle room into some of this as we read the statute as it moves forward. But these are the recommendations that we feel should be accepted by the board to be in compliance with House Bill 110. Thank you.
And so, Mrs. Folk, that the one piece where you talked about if they are 30 minutes or more away, that also applies to folks who want to transport their own kids, because don't we?
No, it does not. This only applies to actual provided transport, Ms. Autry, that the district is required to provide.
Okay.
All righty.
So we have those families who can request to provide their own transportation,
That
and
is
we reimburse.
Okay, so there's a couple of different things here. There's two things you're talking about. If the student has a IEP, and we, through our SPED designation of their IEP, said they were entitled to transport services, if a parent feels that they could do a better job and understand that means that they have the right capacity to transport, then we will offer a payment to the parent directly. The other part that happens, and this is non-APS students in charter, non-public, private schools. If we don't have an asset, and you've seen this go to board, it's called payment in lieu, or what we short-term PIL. And there's 6 reasons under the code in which we can determine that we cannot provide service to that student. We don't have the bus. It is not going to get to school on time. It is not cost effective, to take one student on a bus that costs you $55,000 to $60,000 a year to operate. There are only the 6 reasons, and if that is the case, that it's determined that it's ineligible to transport that student, it requires, which you have seen, a recommendation through the business affairs and the resolutions that the student then be determined ineligible to transport. Once the board approves it, then a contract is issued to the parent for them to accept the payment, and the payment is at the end of the school year. Currently, up until last year, prior to House Bill 110, the payment for a student for the entire year was $250. House Bill 110 changed that to 50% of the regular educational process transport, which automatically doubled exactly what we paid last year. It went from $250 to a little over $500, and we just got the new payment for this school year 2 weeks ago, and it's $538 and I think 41 cents per student. So therefore, if you have one student and you sign the contract, the issuance of the payment of PIL at the end of June and early July will be one check in that amount. If you have 2 students or 3 students, it's a check per student, as long as we have put them through the RFT, or request for transportation process, and have accepted them and determined we cannot provide service. So I wanted you to have an understanding of the 2 different types.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think it's amazing you know all those numbers down to the cents. That is amazing.
Well, actually, I had to know it because we were getting the budget put together to put the purchase order together to issue those checks, and I had to go out and research it because it never comes out until about this time of year, because they need to know the average district-wide of the entire state to determine that formula that allows them to then divide it by half. All righty? But it also goes on and says it can't be above $2,500 per student. Fortunately, Ohio is very effective and efficient in doing its transport, but still $500 does help offset what we cannot provide. Okay? Thank you.
I have a question. With the addition of the 30-minute travel by bus, are there any families that potentially are used to transporting their own student and used to being reimbursed, but now with the 30 minutes or less, that might be a confusing situation for
I'll
them?
actually tell you about one that happened. It was Old Trail. And Old Trail has had a bus for years. And lo and behold, we had a student that lived way out to the east side, and I'm going to use the very east side of Ellett, and they are over now the 30 minutes and they're not eligible. So yes, I can tell you that has affected. And they are not even eligible for payment at that point. They determined they wanted to attend Old Trail, and they became ineligible once they beyond the 30 minutes. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. So item 3.06 states continued discussion of topics from the last meeting in which I was not in attendance. And so it states emotional support animals and cell phone use. So I don't know if there's any updates that we can discuss from anyone that might have been at those meetings. I apologize, I was not.
I was not at the meeting, but our safety and security retreat is tomorrow, so we may have some additional information following the retreat unless you have something you wanted to share from the policy
Yes, the Neola policies do touch on some optional language for emotional support animals, specifically for students, and then also therapy dogs. Although they do have a note within their optional language which recommends to not adopt such a policy given the liabilities and complexity of such a policy. However, there's been a lot of requests to Neola specifically with regard to having emotional support and therapy animals for both students and for employees. So I think that that's something for the board to discuss and see if that's the kind of policy that they would like to adopt.
So it's stating that we shouldn't?
Saying that we shouldn't, and not necessarily saying that they shouldn't. They do recommend to not include emotional support animals just due to the legal repercussions and the issues and disruption that it can cause. Although there is optional language that Neola provided with a series of recommendations for conditions where they would allow a therapy dog on a premises, but they're quite restrictive, and I think they're reasonable. And I have it here, and I can circulate it at another time. It's probably not worth reading out loud right now, but that's all I have for that, unless there's any questions.
Did they only talk about therapy dogs? And the reason I asked this is I had a request to bring therapy donkeys onto one of our properties. And at that point, yes, I did research it, and there are therapy donkeys. But to your point, I didn't know exactly where to even go with this, because it brings a lot of items up regarding allergies, who supervises, what is the cleanup for therapies, just those type of issues that do come up. Now, I am aware, and I know Ms. Autry is, Children's Hospital has a service in which they hire a company that has therapy dogs that do come in, and they will travel the hospital, say, a certain day of the week, which may be something that could be looked at. They come, they leave. I don't know that we would want to go down with emotional support animals being in the property all the time, only because one of the other issues that has been discussed with us in the past is what happens in an emergency. Who's responsible for the emotional support animal? And some of the people that have requested this have also discussed that they want it to help relieve stress, example, but then again, where do we put the property together for the duties of the functional outside stuff? That means it all has to be cleaned up, and who is responsible in case you don't have a specific classroom, because some of our teachers are travel teachers, and is a staff member also not performing their contracted service if they also are doing the support animal? I mean, if you truly have me doing, and I'll use me as an example, the business affairs person, but I'm the one with the support animal here in the building, do I then not do my duties under my contract if I'm also serving as the support animal supervisor? So I just wanted to give you some of the previous discussions, but the therapy donkeys was a new one on me.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so to address a couple of the things that you touched on, at least, it is specific to, there is an optional section, and again, this is all optional language, with regard to specifically therapy dogs, and then there's another section that is emotional support animals for students. And that one, obviously, it doesn't specify what kind of animals, but the language suggests that it's more akin to a dog than a donkey. But with regard also to what you stated as far as allergic reactions and them relieving themselves inappropriately and having to clean up after them, those are grounds for suspension of the therapy dog, unfortunately. And all of this would have to be under this optional language with either superintendent approval building or the building principal approval or some other designated person who would approve or disapprove the therapy dog. I mean, there's the other requirements for these kinds of animals could include, and under the Neola policy includes documentation of certification as a therapy dog, documentation of educational purpose for the therapy dog, documentation that the dog is not younger than 1 year old, documentation from licensed veterinarian, documentation of insurance policy for liability. So it's not as simple as, sometimes people have therapy dogs and they just kind of find certifications online. So this policy is a lot more stringent, but it definitely still would come with a lot of caveats.
It was said at the last meeting that the administrative guidelines would be drastically redone for that.
Well, and as an example, there is another policy that we already have. You can't bring turtles and other items because they spread salmonella. So you have to be very, very careful when you adjust your policies to do these kinds of things. So I've worked on a couple of these, just trying to figure it out. Obviously, service dogs, we have them. We honor those requirements. And I can say we have currently 3 in the district that are servicing staff members that have gone through the right HR protocol for requirement to have those dogs currently on duty with the assigned employee.
I have a question about the Neola policy. I also was not here at the last board meeting because I was not here. But does the policy differentiate? I think I remember I did watch the last meeting. The 3 types of, environments for therapy sessions. You spoke to one, how the hospital brings in a temporary situation for a day or 2. We did that also at the university. We'd bring in, around exam time, we'd have puppy day. And then there's the emotional support animal that is a one-on-one that you have all the time. And then I believe someone might have alluded to possibly a pilot program type situation where one principal of one building might have a special room or special place that they do for emotional support. So I think those are 3 very different structures of environments. Are any of those listed in there or separated out?
There is a section that is for like curriculum-specific projects and activities. I think that's similar to what you're alluding to, if not the same, kind of. And it requires that staff members seeking approval have the same kind of certifications of health and take precaution to protect the health and safety of the students and keep the surrounding areas clean. However, I'm not seeing in here really the specific process that they would go through to get that approval. It's more so just the requirements, like the conditions that they would need to have in order to get approval granted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I was thinking there's the idea of the traditional class pet, a permanent one animal structure that's always there versus a temporary, we're going to bring in an event versus this is my animal that I'm bringing around. And I think those are very separate concepts.
And to your point, we do have policy regarding animals on property. And therefore, that is allowed as part of the educational process. And actually, CLC has our animal husbandry program currently operating, but that was all set up to meet those guidelines for not only the program and the curriculum and training of the students, it was also to meet all the standards regarding the cleanliness, operation. I mean, we even have to make sure the temperatures are correct. And when we put that program into Old Ellett, that was one of those issues in the winter, as Ms. Autry and Ms. Otley will remember. We had a couple of days that the building was too cold for some of the birds and stuff there. So we're well aware of that classroom setting already that's allowed and is restricted to and well documented. And the teachers and the staff do a nice job with those.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions around that topic? Thank you so much. And so as Superintendent Otley said, there is a safety retreat tomorrow, so I do believe they'll be discussing further about the cell phone use, updates on that. But I know the buildings that I have visited, it's been largely successful. From the students reluctantly, but it seems like they've kind of grown to accept it, that this is inevitably, the best for our building from what I've seen so far. So just putting that out there. And I think as well, the teachers that I've spoken with, they appreciate it. So that's it.
We actually did the committee created a survey, and so those results will be reviewed tomorrow. So we can provide an update at a board presentation for you and through the policy recommendations.
Good deal.
I just wanted to say real quick, it was overwhelmingly supportive that the new cell phone issue, but someone did bring up a point last board meeting or last legal committee meeting that some students might need it for medical reasons. So I don't know if that's something you have discussed.
I actually can give you an update on that. There are, and this is really, it came about for our diabetic students because obviously we have a number of students that need to take their readings and they're now on their phone. If you have a medical diagnosis with us that you are a diabetic and it is in your file, the bag is different than the normal bag. So therefore, mine might be yellow, but say Mary's might be green, and therefore she has access to it if she would need to. So yes, there is a medical attention bag that can be provided once we have the medical documentation as part of the student's file.
Yeah, and I did witness that at one of the schools that I visited. I think it was Elliott, where they're practicing that. So. Okay, are there any other comments, questions, concerns, thoughts? And so, again, I didn't expect to be chairing this meeting, but I'm glad to have come and to, hear some of these updates around our policies, which guide us, the important work of the board. So thank you to everyone in attendance. And at this time, we can adjourn. Thanks, everyone.